If your limited company is buried in debt and you owe money to the company as well, this is exactly what you need to hear right now, because this is where most directors panic, they make the wrong move and they end up personally liable, and in some cases they can lose everything. I have just helped a director whose business owed about £600,000 to creditors, HMRC, suppliers and a lender that had given him a personal guarantee, and he also owed the company £65,000 through something called an overdrawn director's loan account. Now on paper it looked like it was game over, but instead of waiting for somebody to forcibly shut the door or it all go to hell in a handbasket, we structured something called a legal pre-pack. And that's where the guy sold the business to a new company. It protected jobs, it protected work that the company was already on, and we helped him negotiate the director's loan account down so he didn't get wiped out personally. Now, if your business is in serious debt and you're staring at director's loan account and you can't repay it, I want you to watch this video right to the end, because the decisions you make now will determine whether you come out of this clean or personally wrecked. Chris Worden, Director First, welcome to another video. I'm going to explain to you here what's gone on with a client I helped recently. It was in the construction sector. Now, jobs have slowed down. He's got one real bad payer, and at the end of every month things are getting difficult. I'm just going to come to this side for a second. Now, what happened a few years ago, it was absolutely booming. He was growing, and to grow he needed to pay for materials, but he were running out of cash. So what this chap decided to do was to take a personally guaranteed loan for £225,000, okay? And now at the time, the repayments weren't a problem, because the work was coming in, everybody had loads of cash, things were going nicely. But the problem that we've seen recently, people are putting off spending, they're more conscious when it comes to price, they're taking longer to decide, and they are expecting more for their money anyway. As revenues have declined, his costs have stayed the same. In fact, his costs, it's this loan that's killing him. So we go through it. He rang me and says, right, we need to find out what's going on here. Send me over an age creditor list. So he owed 150 grand to PAYE. He owed 120 grand into VAT, and he owed 46 grand in corporation tax. Now this was on something called a time to pay arrangement, where he was paying a percentage monthly over 3 years, okay? He also owed £70,000 to suppliers, and he owed £90,000 to a C-bills. Now the C-bills that he took was under 250,000, therefore there was no personal guarantee attached to the C-bills. So I said, okay, we understand where the problems are. Where's the pressure coming from? He says, the pressure's coming from cash flow. I've not got enough month, I've got too much month at the end of the money. But the real pressure was coming because he'd failed his time to pay arrangement. He basically couldn't keep up with the commitment that he'd given to HMRC. And not only could he not commit to the HMRC, his next 35k VAT bill, he was going to miss completely because he didn't have the cash. And you're thinking, well, why doesn't he have the cash? Okay. On the other side of things, he were owed 200 grand in debtors, he had 20 grand in the account, he owed the company 65 grand, an intercompany that he is connected to owes this business 55 grand. Here's where the big problem is. He has been knocked for £450,000 on a real big contract, okay? He's not going to collect it in. It is a perfect example of subby bashing, okay? He's been a long and arduous, drawn out process with this big firm, and he now realizes he's not going to get paid. So What are his options? In the assets also, his fixed assets were in the accounts at £75,000. So there were some vehicles, there was some plant and machinery, there were some fixtures and fittings in the office, right? So what do we do in this scenario? Okay, let's explain some of the options. Well, option one is, do you think you could go back to HMRC and renegotiate this time to pay arrangement? Now, they're meant to only give you one, but in circumstances, you will be able to renegotiate with HMRC. So we did that. That was his first option. HMRC weren't entertaining it. They were going to send this to legals. And the truth of the matter is, because this money isn't coming in, it's going to take a heck of a lot of an upturn in business for this business to survive. Because it can't pay its debts when it falls due. And its assets, and we're going to go through what its assets are, they're still not enough to pay all the liabilities, okay? So it fails the cash flow test and the balance sheet test. Now the next option, and he liked the idea of this, is something called a CVA, Company Voluntary Arrangement. And the reason why people like CVAs is, from the outside world, they're paying their debts, there's no change of management, and insolvency practitioners there just to oversee and supervise it. But when we started to dig into this, we'd have to get 75% of the creditors to approve the CVA. And this guy had quite a few time to pay arrangements over the years. It wasn't his first rodeo. And I believe that the HMRC would actually just see it, this is another time to pay arrangement. And the insolvency practitioner wanted £10,000 down to draft the CVA. And they were quite clear, listen, we don't think this will help, but we'll try. So it ruled out the CVA. So there was a time to pay, failed. We looked at a CVA, no. And you've got to also mention, listen, can you bring in some additional funds? Now, the insolvency practitioner's got to say that, but I have to say at this stage, listen, John, it's not really called John. You've already put 225 grand that you've personally guaranteed. If you pump any more into this business, you need to be 100% sure that it's going to survive. Because the vast majority of this debt is not John's debt, it is company debt. And an insolvency process will take care of that. This whopping great debt is John's debt, okay? Now, if he raises more money, because you can actually borrow money to pay HMRC, right? But you are then converting HMRC into personal debt, okay? So, we had to look at what were the options here. And let's have a look at some solutions. Do you like me, props? And the solutions that we come through. We said, right, the first thing that we need to do here, we want you to sign an authority, 64-8, and I want one of the insolvency practitioners to speak to HMRC, okay? So the first thing we did is we spoke to HMRC. The HMRC want to know that you're engaging with an insolvency practitioner. Because if you're taking advice of an insolvency practitioner, there's a good chance you're not going to do anything stupid, okay? So that was a big tick. And the insolvency practitioner picked the phone and says, listen, we're reviewing all options. Will you give us 4 weeks? And that gave him time to get his ducks in a row. We then did a valuation, okay? The valuation was conducted by an agent, so they valued the plant and the machinery and the vehicles, and if you remember, it was in the accounts at 75 grand. But, excuse me, something's fell on the floor. But what the accounts didn't take into consideration is a lot of the vehicles were financed. So there was some plant and machinery, and he managed to buy the assets at £12,000. Now this valuation, it gave two figures. There was an in situ value of 12k and an ex situ of 6k, okay? Now we guided the director is if you make an offer to the agent near the in situ value, the agent will accept that offer and you won't be criticised because no one can say to you, you've took these assets out of the company at an undervalue. Now we explored what's the best option. Is it liquidation? Is it administration? Benefits of administration is it's quick. You can file something at court being in administration that day. But there are some additional costs. There's solicitors costs, there's agents costs. There can be sort of £10,000–15,000 of costs on a job like this before the administrator's paid. There's obviously an evaluator's report that's needed. And it was looked at, do you know what? It's probably not the right option for this business. The best option is going to be a liquidation. The difference between liquidation and administration, just so you know, is administration, you go into admin and then you notify creditors. Liquidation's different, and it allows you to inform the creditors that you intend to put the business into liquidation, and in theory your creditors could rally round and bring another insolvency practitioner to the creditors meeting to take over the liquidation. Now you'll notice there was, I think there's £60–70,000 worth of suppliers. This guy's intention is to pay most of those suppliers back, but pay it in the new company, okay? Not everybody wants to do that, but you're perfectly free to do that. I would say to people who's considering that, be really careful. Don't take too much debt into your new company because it could recreate the problem again. So this guy, the agent, recommended the sale of the assets at £12,000. That's not all. You'll notice he was owed in about £200,000, okay? Now, when it comes to construction, insolvency practitioners find it very difficult to collect the debt in. And I'll tell you for why. The minute that someone who owes you money finds out you're going into liquidation, they're going to start to say things, well, the work's crap, we're not paying the retentions, there's no warranties going forward. And it's very hard for the insolvency practitioner to collect that money in because they don't have the information that you have. So what we was able to do is get a deal where the insolvency practitioner is going to pay them 20% of all the debts that they collect in for the insolvency practitioner. And the reason why they're going to be able to pay them 20% is this company's new company have actually agreed to give warranties and guarantees to the work that's been done because they want to work with these clients again in the new company. So everything that they collect in, they're going to get 20% back off the insolvency practitioner as a debt collection fee. Now, some of the new contracts that have been offered are with really strong companies. So we introduce them to somebody who may be able to factor the debt in the new co. Now factoring, I'm oversimplifying this, but you might be on 60 to 90 day payments terms. But if your customer's good enough, the minute they give you that invoice, you can then give that to a factoring company who will pay you a large percentage of that invoice on day one, therefore easing cash flow, okay? Now, big problem that this chap had was his DLA settlement of £9,000. I've just knocked water over, okay? So he had a DLA of £65,000. And a director's loan account is when the insolvency practitioner is going to come to the director to ask him to pay it back. Now, this chap luckily had up up-to-date management information. So we looked in his zero said he owed £65,000. We spoke to his accountant. His accountant confirmed there's no expenses that can come off the director's loan account. And we're left with the fact that the insolvency practitioner is duty bound to try and get £65,000 off this chap once they go into insolvency. So what we do here at Director First, where it's a little bit different, we help negotiate that settlement down. And the way that we do this is we go through the assets and liabilities of the director. So what is the house valued at? What is the mortgage? Are they married? Because if you've got a partner and they're nothing to do with the business, an insolvency practitioner cannot touch their share of the equity. Now, we looked at this, and when we realised this guy also had personal debt, he owed 20 grand in HMRC, he had 30 grand in personal loans and credit cards. But if you remember, he owed over 200 grand to a personally guaranteed debt loan that he took to prop the business up. So we sort of said to the insolvency practitioner, listen, and he could basically manage to borrow £9,000 to settle it at full and final. So we said to the insolvency practitioner, listen, he's offering £9,000, he'll pay it within 30 days, and they've got to weigh up and go, right, well, if I force this chap into bankruptcy, okay, it takes years to actually get somebody, not into bankruptcy, but to get them to sell their house, it can be years away. There's a lot of risk. This guy was borderline personally insolvent on the back of his personal debts and the personally guaranteed debt that was going to crystallise once he goes into insolvency. So the insolvency practitioner can justify that £9,000, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, within 30 to 60 days is a better settlement than taking legal action. It saves time, it saves legal costs, and again, they can justify that. Now, they can't agree to that on day one. They've still got to do their investigation. But what we do here at Director First is we put everything together, and on the basis that this director has told us everything, that is what they're likely to settle on. Okay. So he's been able to buy the business back for 12 grand. He's been able to pay his director's loan account over 9,000. His 12k, he's paying it at 2k per month for 60 days, and he's paying that, it's 30 or 60 days, actually, the detail escapes me. From £600,000 of a debt, he's been able to settle it for just over 20. Now, I want to finish on his personally guaranteed debt. What he's been able to do, we introduced him to someone called Gary Whitehead. There's a podcast I've done with Gary. Please go and have a look at it. And Gary's been able to negotiate with this lender to restructure the terms over a longer period of time. And for the first 6 months, while this business is getting up and away, he's gone on minimal payments, and he's going to step those up in 6 months when this business starts to make money. So I hope you found the video useful. If you want more information, if you want to speak with me and my team, put your details in the free assessment and we'll give you a call. And if not, go and watch another video there.